Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
So, just wanted to check real quick. And this is going to be a little bit of a free-flowing, off-the-cuff type of discussion on things because we notice comments. We know that there's probably 90 to 95% of the viewers are return viewers that have watched many of our videos. And really, since I started doing this about 5 years ago, there's probably been over 3,000 videos done and talked about all sorts of things. All sorts of things. But understanding things from a perspective that's not one that's programmed in by the system that we find ourselves in can be tricky.
Yes, I think that's a safe way to put that. There's a delicate balance because many people their belief system is very precious to them. It's very important. It's part of their survival, and it is difficult to look outside of your safe belief system, but we try to help expand these belief systems because there's so much goodness out there.
Exactly. So, I think of some of the comments that came through lately, and one comment from one of today's videos where somebody said, no chakras, it's all about getting the Holy Spirit so, you're ready for when Jesus comes back again. And, again, we could get into the fact that, people just don't know anything but the basic stuff they've been told. So that's the whole picture that they have of everything, and this is really the majority of the population. Whatever tradition you've been born into, that's the one that for the most part you've been brought up with, and most people haven't looked outside of that. Some do. There most definitely are people that have studied comparative religion, comparative philosophies, just gone in depth into spiritual traditions. For me, that was my number one driving thing since I was 5 years old. And so every different tradition I could find, I studied. And not only studied, but went and took part in as many as possible to experience them.
Right, and I have noticed with people that loyalty to family seems to be very, very important because they feel their mom and dad had this belief system, that's going to be their belief system too, and then children are raised under these generations of belief systems, and they don't really expand because they haven't been exposed to anything.
So we talked recently about Ananda Mayima, who was a modern day saint, so to speak, that lived in India, and a beautiful soul. And we read an excerpt from Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda, in which she was brought to a man that was on his deathbed, and you could actually hear his death rattle, going through his breath. And she touched him, and he was healed. He was better. A miracle like we see attributed to Yeshua. And again, I just prefer to use Yeshua because that's what he prefers, because that was actually his name. So many people don't understand that there were over 200 Gospels. You have 4 right now. Well, we've discovered other ones that were destroyed since, but over 200 instead of the 4 that you have. That his name wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. And Jesus is the Latinized translation from Jesus, which is the Greek version of his name, but not a name that he would have responded to. And it wasn't put out there in mass until 1535 because it was Swiss translation of the Bible. The Bible itself wasn't given to the masses, obviously, until the Protestant Reformation times. And the most famous Bible of all, King James Bible, King James was a Masonic lodge master. He was in charge of all the Masonic lodges in England and in Scotland. So he was obviously the insider's insider. And, we talk about the groups like the Illuminati and so many others. Well, obviously he was in those secret society control groups that are all about controlling the narrative. So when we realize that, and we look at the true history of things, then perhaps we realize we should look deeper. Perhaps we should actually go within, heavens forbid. You actually try to learn something for yourself instead of basically taking the programming, the indoctrination that has been given to one.
I know for me it was difficult because I really wanted to be a good person. I wanted to go to church. I wanted to absorb all of this information. I wanted to be part of something much bigger than myself. But as I learned, things just were not adding up. Things just didn't make sense. And I had to go outside of the Bible to find things to, bring myself to a deeper understanding, which led to multiple belief systems. And now I have kind of my own religion because I adopted whatever felt right from any of them, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And, again, it's in studying and learning through others that we start to perhaps begin to sort in our mind and in our hearts what makes sense to us. One size, as we've said so many times, it's one of my favorite things to say, one size doesn't fit all. But this world wants you to conform to one of its prescribed systems of thought, whether that's Democratic or Republican. Could there be anything else? Could there be anything besides capitalist and communist? Socialist? Well, that's just a degree of communism. There was another question where somebody had said, because we brought up the fact that Yeshua was an Essene, and the Essenes live communally. So they kept going back to, well, so you're saying Jesus was a communist. And automatically people are going to think of Mao Zedong's communism or Stalin's communism. Communism that we've seen in this time. Yeshua wouldn't call himself that's for sure. He wasn't about having a ruling oligarchy, an elite that was ruling everything. And though that system was in place, that's why he lived as an Essene and basically lived outside of the system as much as possible. And then he did travel the globe. And he went in many different places, and he did live off of whatever people would give him, as is the tradition in India with the holy men there, the gurus there, with many of them, the ascetics, like the ascetics that Buddha was with, that just simply lived in the forest, basically butt naked, and whatever people would give them to eat, that's what they ate, and often they didn't eat. Mm-hmm. Well, Yeshua followed the same basic pattern. And so, again, it's that having a mind that can only see what the world has given you. We need to go beyond that. And it's so hard to shed that programming, but it can be done.
It can be done. It's a slow process, and it's almost like people feel they might need permission to look outside the Bible. People feel safer if they know someone else who believes in Yeshua has also done the same things. And we have used Yeshua in so many of our healings, so much of our energy work he is involved with. Yet we also look to other masters for help and inspiration.
Yeah, and we've done mantras to call in the energy of, say, Lakshmi, who is a Hindu goddess of prosperity, and Yeshua has shown up. Mm-hmm. Because he was the one that could help us with a certain thing at that time. They worked together. The human mind not understanding that these benevolent beings, because they are worshipped in different traditions, given respect and paid such high regard in different traditions, it doesn't mean that they're divided, because they're not. That's humans that divide, not them. They're so far above that.
Yes, that's our mind making something safe for us to believe in. That's our mind doing the dividing. It's not them. They're the ones who want to be there if they are needed. They don't mind that others come and help.
No, and we've talked to various ones about this, and it's just, they believe in helping the greater good, and they are basically emissaries of the light, of the true source. So a lot of people have the question, especially in these times, why does God allow these things to happen? And first we need to clarify who we're talking about. When you say God, who are you really talking about? Because if you're talking about the God of the Old Testament and you're going to name him Yahweh or Jehovah, then you're not talking about source, because it's not source. Source is different than that entity. And Cindy's shaking her head with her eyes bugged out. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Very, very different. And so, the source of all does not want to condemn anybody or anything to anything negative, because ultimately source is love.
And that's where we need to look at things and stop and ask the question, can the source of all be heard walking through the forest?
No, and why would the source of all think that, a sacrificial goat or lamb smells good? Because if source is ultimately, it's just those concepts that people don't question. Because it's been taught to you by your elders. It's been taught to you by your parents. Have your parents ever made a mistake? Do you think your teachers ever made a mistake? Has there ever been a president that never made a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
Any world leader, any religious authority that is above errors? We need to look at things in a different light. One of the concepts that is basically acknowledged universally is reincarnation, and the fact that the soul, transmigration of the soul moves from vehicle to vehicle, because the soul is eternal. And the reason the soul is eternal is because source, the real source, is in each one of us, and that is what the soul is. It's source.
And we are an animated flame of source, here to have our own experience, here to bring our own understandings to ourselves, and we should be allowed to express ourselves through any which way, form, or fashion, just because that's what source intended.
The things that we've learned in the last couple of years have been mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Even after, over 50 years of studying every religion I could find, every philosophy I could find, none of them prepared me for what we've gotten through the channeled messages from talking to these beings directly. And it's still a process of learning, honestly. I'm still learning all the time, every single day. There's new things that come in that make me readjust, a little bit here or a little bit there, the reality that's in my conceptual reality, basically, how I view things. Now, parts of it haven't changed, such as that, the basics of what we see is that, we're all eternal beings. Ultimately, the body is just a vehicle. There's been many vehicles. And, I've been able to recover information about multiple incarnations with myself, including the last incarnation. And now I know why, the name for my son came into my mind, because it was from previous incarnation. It was a name that was just comfortable with me, and I liked it instinctively, even though I didn't have any relatives or anybody, good friends, anybody of significance. But it was a name that I was used to hearing every single day. So it's that type of recognition. I had glimpses of lives as a Buddhist monk living in a cave that were very, very vivid and real. And I also had recollections of other lives, literally 2 lives as a Templar. And I shouldn't go into too many more details, because the powers that be do listen to all these things, and they are watching to see how much we have learned about ourselves, and the fact that we keep coming back incarnation after incarnation fighting the system. This is just what we do, and we recognize that. So the soul is eternal, and source is in the soul. So there is no, well, there are beings that might want to punish you. There are beings that might want to torment you, but it's not the source of all.
No, it's not the source of all. These entities that want to bring punishment and discourage us from understanding consciousness are beings that are trying to control us, and they're trying to control our every move. And the best way for them to do that is to isolate the mind in a single belief system and then make people afraid to look out elsewhere. And they do that because they say that, if you do anything different or believe anything different, your soul is going to burn in hell for eternity. And that is really scary. I remember going through that thinking, I have all these other things that I want to explore, but I'm afraid of the consequences. And I really, really felt that that was true. But, my soul needed to escape. It needed to explore. It needed to understand astrology. It needed to understand tarot cards. It needed to understand different aspects of consciousness. So I just did. And I broke free, and here I am. And now I'm able to talk to other people that might feel in that stuck position who want to explore their soul as well.
So there are many different traditions. If we look to the Kabbalah, Hebrew mysticism, if we look to the Gnostic tradition and Hermeticism, the Western mystery traditions that have to be mystery again because people lost their lives, for their beliefs, we see that there's this concept of the tree of life, and it takes into account the fact that there's a lot of different dimensions upon which life exists. And when you're in any of those dimensions, even though to us, if we looked at somebody and were able to conceive somebody that was, say, on the fifth dimension, they would just perhaps look like a shimmering light. That's all we would be able to actually see of them. But to them, they're very solid. And just like looking at your best friend, your partner, your lover, that's solid. It's just a difference of again, vibrations and frequency. So there are all these dimensions that are interconnected. And at the top you see Ein Sof, Ein Sof and Ein. It's light, limitless light. This is in reference to Source and how it emanates outwards and down through the different densities. You could also look at it up there at Kether as the crown, or the crown chakra, and then we could go on down through the chakras, going down to Malkuth, which is related to the earth itself and this density of life. Many different densities. Again, we're moving on up. I've seen some equate Tiphereth, beauty, with Christ consciousness, and some others have equated it differently. Again, Christ consciousness is what really it's all about. It's not about the blood of Christ, because again, what sort of being demands a blood sacrifice? That whole concept never made any sense. Why did he have to die on the cross? Well, God demanded a blood sacrifice, so he had to become human in order to demand his own death to get us off of our sin, which was basically eating an apple. Say, yeah, okay, sure. It just, people don't think to question why. And it really, when you start to go deep into the esoteric, it's all about understanding consciousness itself. And there's no more need for these allegories and stories. Again, these stories are told because so many will not be able to comprehend, but there are those that could comprehend how things are and how the universe truly works, which is really a mind-blowing, amazing thing that is freeing to think about. We could view each density kind of as a scale. So, if you're looking at, say, take that first density there as third density, there's all different degrees. Each note is specific to a certain frequency. Each note is a specific frequency, and then as you climb up the octaves, you're jumping into fourth density and then fifth density, and it goes all up on through the line.
Right, and we are here together working on coming back together as one, and we should be able to tell all of our stories, all of our experiences, learn from each other to bring back that sense of oneness, bring back that Christ consciousness. It's a vibration is what is. We are going up to that vibration.
Yeah, the guides were just saying in one of the messages the fact that the controllers have hidden the miracles that have been done by other beings on this planet because it doesn't fit in with the belief system they want people having. They want you to, expect Jesus to come back and he's going to fix everything, because they know that they've set up that whole concept in the first place, and that he's not coming back in that way to wipe out the armies of the world and set up his 1,000-year millennial rule. Mm-hmm. They know that, so they want you believing that, because they know you're looking for somebody that's not coming back in the way that you're expecting. Because if you look to Yogananda's book, for instance, The Second Coming of Christ, he points out the truth, which is that the second coming is happening all the time.
Yes.
It's one heart at a time, one soul at a time. Absolutely.
And even Yeshua himself said, don't look here, don't look there, you're not going to find me.
Right. He also wanted to just say, he's appreciative for all the happy birthdays, but he's actually born in May.
It's not thank you, but it's not my birthday. That's what he says.
Yeah, he was actually born in our current month of May. The calendars have changed, as we know. You have the Gregorian, the Julian. Of course, the Hebrew calendar was different. You have lunar calendars, and now we have solar calendars. So, again, but roughly he was born in the month of May. But he does appreciate it, as he is readily available to anybody that reaches out. And it all depends on, how open your third eye is, how open your chakras are. If your Kundalini's been activated, those are the things to work on in this life. Is to work on the light body, work on the energetic body, work on the Merkaba. Those are the things we could take with us. The physical body goes back to the earth. Though there are some cases of people achieving the rainbow body and ascending without actually losing the physical body, it just translating into a light body, but that is a rarity. Mm-hmm. Although at some point in time, it could definitely happen in mass. As we look at the Tao symbol, the yin and the yang, many are probably familiar with this. And I would hardly advise reading the Tao Te Ching, because I did a recording of the entire Tao Te Ching, reading the whole thing. I think it's on Evolutionary, it might be on both. There's so much wisdom there. And it's just a different type of wisdom, because it's not about punishment. It's not about original sin. It's not about looking for a second coming. It's more about how does the universe work? What is consciousness itself?
And it's absolutely okay to explore these things, and we strongly encourage it, because that's your soul growth. Our soul growth is so very important. It's what allows you to really enjoy things. It's what centers you. It's what brings you understanding, is to go out and explore these different belief systems.
To the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. And so that's Lao Tzu. And again, the need is for meditation. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth, and the named is the mother of all things. So there again is reference to, you might want to switch Tao to Source, or God with the big G, because Source is above having a name, because Source is not just the manifest, but it's all that could ever possibly be manifest. It's anything that could be conceptualized, and even beyond that. It's in our human minds at this point in time, the best we could do is get these feelings of the oneness that comes from Source. And that is most definitely one of the things that many yogis strive for, is that feeling of the oneness and that transcendence that is just beautiful. And when we are in the presence of the devas, we feel that, and it is beyond description to feel the love of these beautiful beings, these amazing beings that are on the higher densities and closer to Source itself.
Absolutely. These are things that when we sit with them and we sit with these words, it can alter your perspective, change your perspective so that you view things in a whole different light. And that's when we start to mature. And that's what humans were supposed to do. And I always like to say and remind people, they have us so busy out working, paying bills, running kids here and there, worrying about other things. They keep us being a human doing, but we are human beings. We are supposed to be.
So when we say that, then it means that, like, say for instance, Allah is not Source, because it's something that could be named. Yahweh is not Source. It's something that could be named. Even Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, even any of these other entities that can be named, they're not ultimately Source. They're not the source of everything, because they are a unique expression of Source, as are each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not Source. So that's the misconcept that's not understood in the Western mind.
And what I look at is I look at all of these different churches across the states, across the globe, and when you go to a church, they all have the same thing where they say, well, this is the only way, this is the only truth. But how could that be from one church to the next? How could they have the only truth? That was something that I had to bring to the forefront and say, okay, there must be more.
Yes. And so there's many verses in the Tao Te Ching that can really open the mind. So the Tao is all present and all embracing insofar as it pervades all things. So again, if God is omnipresent, it has to be in everything. That's just a given. There's no way it could be omnipresent and not be in everything. And it's everywhere precisely because it sustains all existing beings. So, there again, the life force, the prana, the ki, the chi, the vril, all these things, are again manifestations and the way Source animates everything with itself. We can see these things, like we were talking about the chakras. There's machinery that can show you the chakras. There's machinery now that can show you the reality of chakras and aura, and how emotionally it can change instantaneously. And I actually have acquaintances that have these machines and have done demos on them. It's a reality. Chakras are a reality. Now, these are all teachings that are given to us by benevolent beings when we're not in the Kali Yuga. It's only in the Kali Yuga that they want to turn all this into a negative viewpoint.
Right, and we should have the understanding of chakras and energy work. There are, when you measure the nervous system of the human body, you can find these collections of nerves where energy is much stronger from one point to the next. And we can actually get blocks in these chakras that can create issues with your 3D body. So it's important that we have a good cleansing process to keep ourselves clear of other negative energies or dark forces, so that our body can get everything that it needs, all the information it needs to be very healthy.
The Tao sustains the 10,000 things, but does not demand to call him master or lord. So again, the source of all has no ego. Doesn't need to be worshipped in any way. It is pure love. The way to worship Source is just to become more heart-centered, more compassionate, and you will rise up in vibration going towards that reunification with Source as we climb up through the densities. But it doesn't have a need to be praised day and night.
Mm-mm.
Now, if you feel the love welling up in your heart and that's what you want to do, then that's perfectly fine. But again, we don't want to be giving our energy to beings that are, portraying themselves as benevolent, but are actually some of the beings that are controlling us in this negative matrix. The Tao does not favor good or evil, because in order for there to be any sort of motion, we have to have this duality. And it creates the energetic signature that allows for things to develop and progress. And that is both in a negative and in a positive light. It is the way that the manifest universe manifests.
It's about expression.
It is. And again, we are consciousness. We're not the bodies. So this consciousness can't be created or destroyed. It always is. And when new souls come into being, it's really a piece of that love light that we know as Source that takes on a unique identity brought separately from Source, but still connected to Source.
Very much so.
And I know this is, for people of a Western mindset, hard to comprehend. So you have the Atman. The notion of the Atman is related to Brahman. So Brahman is transcendent reality, where Brahma is thought of as one of the trinity of the main Hindu deities. Of course, there's really a female component to the trinity as well as a masculine component. And so there you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. But Brahman is the supreme ultimate. Now the Atman is translated as self or soul, but it's different from the notion of an individual soul. In Hindu belief, each person has an individual soul, a jiva, and the individual soul confers uniqueness and personality. It's not the same as the Atman. So you could translate the Atman more to being your higher self, so to speak, or your source self, and the jiva being the unique incarnation. Now, some of the things that get mind-boggling is the fact that your source self could actually have multiple incarnations going on Earth even, at the same time, at staggered times. It might have one unique expression that was born in, say, 1923 and ends up dying in 1973, and it could have had another one that was born in 46 and ends up dying in 2021. And it could have yet another one. Now, this is part of the mysteries that I'm still grappling with personally, as well as the fact that you could have multiple higher selves of a very high quality decide to pool their resources and create a new soul, so to speak, by giving portions of their essence, their source self, to what many times is kind of a project. And that's again something that is not commonly known. But you could have beings, let's just take some of the ones that we've been referencing. You could take a being like Vishnu or Krishna, who is an incarnation of Vishnu. Now, say Krishna might come into an agreement with Archangel Gabriel, and together they might create of their own essence a new being that will become its own unique Atman.
Right. Then of its higher selves, it has Krishna and Gabriel.
Yes. And, that there are those walking the planet right now that are of lineages like that and don't have a clue. So, that is one of the big mysteries. And it might be that there's 20 different beings that get together and create a new source self, a new oversoul, a new higher self from their own energies, which ultimately, it's all source energy.
And there's so many things to learn and understand that has been kept from us just to keep us under control, which really saddens me, because people are so afraid of exploring about who they are, what are they made of, what is their ancestral lineage. They're made up of all kinds of things, and I just want to see people be able to understand themselves.
Yeah, so once a consciousness is, it always is. As we've said, say, take Vishnu, who most recognize having 10 incarnations, some traditions even more, Shiva, uncountable incarnations. Every single one of those incarnations doesn't stop as far as its consciousness. It still is, even though Vishnu is, just like with Lakshmi. She had an incarnation as Radhe and an incarnation as Sita. All three of those are beings that you can contact. And yet, the three of them are one at the same time also.
Exactly. It gets deep.
It gets deep and mind-blowing. But again, in these bodies and limited with these brains, we cannot necessarily left-brained understand this, but we can experience it through that gnosis, through that knowing, that transcendence that comes when we have a deep meditative practice. And again, I would recommend the mantras as being one of the first and foremost things to do, because they purge out negative energies and entities from our sphere and allow the benevolent ones to help us and guide us.
And they can actually remove blocks, and they can help you repattern yourself.
Absolutely. So, again, when the question comes, is God mad at us? Well, source? Absolutely not. Enki Enlil?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be a little bit on the cranky side.
Mm-hmm.
All these other beings that have portrayed themselves as source, but they're not source.
Well, they want to portray themselves because they want power and they want control. So they try to make themselves, the almighty everything, so everyone has to look to them to ask permission.
Well, what they'll do too is they'll genetically modify the vehicle, i.e. the body, and then claim ownership of it. Interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You could also be copyrighted, so to speak. When they file, what's that word? Oh, I'm getting a blank.
I don't know, but they think they created it so that they
Patents.
think they own it.
When they patent something.
Yes.
When they patent something, and there's a big thing right out there with the number one question in everybody's mind upon the land since December 2019, if you have a clue of what we're talking about, and patents. And again, we keep going back to that whole genetic component, claiming ownership. But as Yeshua said before Abraham was, I am, because the soul is eternal. So they don't own that, not at all. They can modify the vehicles on this planet time and time again. Try out this, try out that. Okay, we're done with Homo habilis. Okay, we're done with Homo erectus. Okay, Neanderthals are not controllable. We're done with them. Done with those Denisovans. They're too smart and too in tune with the earth. They gotta go. Well, no more Cro-Magnon. Too big, too strong, too smart, too in touch with the earth. Homo sapiens. Yeah, they might not be as controllable as we thought. You get the picture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, time to modify.
Yes, but ultimately, that's not us. This is just our vehicle. And they don't own us. And they did not create us.
Absolutely not.
So who is your creator? You are.
Mm-hmm.
As source lies within you. As always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Thanks for also supporting Medicinal Foods. There's a link at the top of the page, and use the coupon code EEA to get a discount, and also supports the channel. As always, may Source bless you, and may the Force be with you.
Yes.
Namaste.
Namaste.